want to thank the good folk in CME, Corey, brother Shane. I know there's a couple other brothers. I apologize if I'm missing your name, but of course the good brother Derek as well, for inviting me. I think I've been at CCP. I think this is my 5th year now. We've been trying to do some things with CME. I've always kind of been involved with a few things. Several students. I know brother Leroy's on here. Several students from CME have come through. And Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, CME, before it was CME, did this come out of the book club?
This was an extension of it, yeah. So
okay.
That was, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so when I was a student at CCP, it was something, the Black Book Club or the Men's Book Club or something like that. I can't remember, but okay. I was talking to Corey and Boss. I think it was the same thing, but I wasn't sure. So it speaks to the tremendous work that was being done with the book club and with CME, that we can still see institutions like this where brothers could come into a space. And I was just listening to the conversation even before they were talking about shower caps and how to keep you know what I mean? Like, in other words, it's a space that nurtures the idea that you are supported as a Black man in spite of, and we all need these safe spaces, right? Like the world could be on fire, but we need to come in a place where we know we're going to be supported and understood and be seen and all those other things. So thank you to the tremendous work that y'all doing. I'm not going to, what I would like to do is talk for a bit today, but then to have conversation at the end. I think it'll be a good thing if before we roll out of here, you're able to ask questions or make responses or comments of some of the things that I'll speak about. All right. So I would like to, what time did we go to, Corey? What time did you initially say, brother?
1:30. So it's like a little bit more than normal to 1:15, but so yeah, it's till 1:30.
Okay. So I'll go for a bit, but then if it's okay, we could do some questions at the end and some discussion. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So let's, I'm gonna try my best here. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Give me just a second to set this up. All right. Give me just a second. I'm a novice when it comes to this stuff. So I'm gonna share my screen and we'll go from there. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay. That looks like it's it, right? We can all see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's get started. So the theme that we'll discuss today is Sankofa and the importance of remembering and learning from our history, okay? We could probably spend an entire semester just talking about the importance of memory and remembering and the value or the utility of remembering and learning from our history. And we're all familiar with this, right? We've heard this expression, if you don't learn from your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. Brother Malcolm said, of all of our studies, history is best prepared to reward our efforts. I mean, so there's something intrinsically connected to history and improvement, history and moving forward, history and value. We've heard this. I don't think there's too many folk who don't understand this. I always ask my students, I'm not a trained historian. I'm trained in Africana studies, which sees the benefits, of course, history, but we don't approach it in the same disciplinary way in terms of being objective, right? Within Africana studies, we understand that lived experiences are just that. And so you can't remove yourself from it in terms of the interrogation of it. There's something of value there that you need to learn from. Students always say, I don't really like history. I always tell them you probably just had a bad history teacher, right? Or as Fela Kuti would say, teacher don't teach me no nonsense. In other words, you may have just not been learning about the stuff that was of value to you. Because if we look at history as something that should be of value to us and then nothing that we're learning about history shows any utility in our lives going forward, then why the hell would we care about it? I mean, yeah, we're going to learn it, right? And most of us were taught it as events. You're given a date and you told what happened on that date, but there's no connection to it, right? It's as though these things happen in a silo or a vacuum, right? You learn 1776, but there's no context to 1776 outside of we gained our independence, right? And by we, I just mean this nation. But if you told history as narrative, then it has to add more context to the thing. The event is not enough. The event is good for what? A game show. If I tell you this date, can you tell me something about it? Okay, yeah. In 1492, we could all probably recite it, right? Columbus sailed the water blue. But what was Columbus sailing for? That's narrative. So when we talk about history within the Africana setting, within Black study setting, what we are talking about is what is the value and narrative of the history that we are talking about and discussing? What was the context of it in the past? Not objective context. Yes, we need objectivity. What is the context in terms of the people who derive from this history? And then what value is it in our lives now? And does it even hold value in our lives? Because we could discard it at one moment, but then 2 generations later, there's some value in it again, so they pick it up. So in other words, we don't quite completely bury history. We can put it to the side and say it doesn't work now. So in our project for today, what we will look at is the importance and understanding of Sankofa, or Sankofa, this Akan word, this Akan expression, the Akan of West Africa, which could be understood as almost as a proverb. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The significance of it not just being a word or expression or even an illustration, but a proverb. In other words, we use these things that you can see, and within it is housed all of these lived experiences and ideas and wisdom. Now it's up to you to know it, right? There's one proverb that says, only to the wise one, the proverb is not to be explained. To the foolish one, there is no interpretation. In other words, what? If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Maybe you'll get it later. So we say that to say what? If you don't get it all today, don't sweat yourself, right? It's a marathon. I know CME be shouting that out all the time, right? It's a marathon. Nipsey's album was 4 years since the release, his first studio album, right? Just passed this week. This is a marathon, so we ain't gonna get it all today. Get in where you fit, in other words. The things that stick, let them stick. Then move from there and do more research on it. All right. Okay. Ground rules for Africana intellectual work. These ground rules were created not by me, not by the brother who mentored me, but by high school students. It was a project, a national project called Freedom Schools, which Philadelphia was a part of. It's still in existence to this day. These were high school students who came up with how do we want to approach the heavy lifting of summer research that we're going to be doing. So the first ground rule, and we use these in my class all the time, is to be present, right? We all somewhere right now else, in our heads, in our minds, right? We in a whole pandemic. So we definitely, it's hard to be present, but to approach Africana intellectual work, we got to be present. It's the initial step to put our intellectual energies towards doing and being. And this idea of being present is, if we look at it, we can discuss it in more greater detail later, but it's a vertical presence as well as a horizontal presence. What does that mean? We are physically here as well as spiritually and emotionally and mentally here. We are kind of putting to the side for this moment the things that are of concern. That is not to disregard them. We're putting to the side. So in this moment, we will seize the opportunity to be present. In other words, what? Intellectual work involves labor, right? This is not the Wikipedia joint. We all use it, myself included. There's parts of this presentation today, I went right to Wikipedia, but that's not the heavy lifting. That's not the being present. We can do that for 30 seconds, know it, come back off of it, discuss it. The heavy lifting is this vertical and horizontal work of being present, especially as it relates to the topics and issues for today. So the first one is be present. Second one is read and write. Since the beginning of time of humanity, coming out of the Nile Valley civilization in Egypt, Black folk have been reading and writing. We could probably spend a whole other semester talking about the intellectual work of Black folk and whether Black folk who were brought to this country were literate and what literate means. Civilization that writes things down. Okay, well, when I go to Egypt, I see things written down as well. We can talk about the papyrus, but I see things that are written down that we're still reading today. Second ground rule is to read and write. I had a graduate professor who will put you out of the class if you didn't read for that week. Matter of fact, no, undergrad. He'd go put us in a circle. He'd go around the class and say, did you read for the assignment today? No. Okay, see you later. In other words, what? What do you have to offer if you didn't read? Now, I would do it differently. My only rule was if you didn't read, you couldn't talk. That wasn't to silence you. It was to remind you of the labor of this work, because it is not an opinion-based work, especially from Black studies. Black folk think because they Black, well, folk think because you're Black, that you automatically know what Black Studies is. Imagine the disservice it does to Black Studies to think, because I've lived this thing, I understand the intellectual work. And this is not to create a hierarchy of the work. That's not what I'm saying. What Malcolm say? What, at the time, I think he said 25 cents in the library card, you can learn all you need to know about the world. So it's not about a hierarchy of intellectual work. It's about what? Putting pen to paper. We could talk about Yehudi the scribe, right? We call him Thoth, the Greeks, because they did what they wanted with the world. But his original name was Yehudi. He was the original scribe. He would write your name down. And then we could talk about Seshet, his counter, who brought math into the world. But these were readers and writers. Or, in other words, to inscribe into this conversation. Again, if we talking about going around in this circle, we just adding our verse to this thing. What will you inscribe through your reading and writing project? And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end, the utility, right? The pragmatics of Sankofa. How do we utilize this idea in our time, all right? So that's second, to read and write. Take notes, right? I take notes all the time. I can't even copy books sometimes for students because I got all my notes in the margins. But write, journal, whatever it is, right? Because everything is a what? Everything is a text. We read all day. Beanie Siegel said what? I can feel it in the air. What is he doing? He's reading that space. Everything is a text. So we do it all the time. But the ground rule for intellectual work says to justify your being here, you must engage by listening and inscribing by writing. Because that's all we're doing when we're reading is listening to what? Voices from history. That's it. Lastly, speak to the after. If you have a pen, write this down. We'll learn a little bit of metanetra or hieroglyphics today. Again, the Greeks called it hieroglyphics. The Egyptians called it metanetra. Speak to the after, translated into the hieroglyphics, is MDW, Madu, MKT, maquette. You don't put any vowels in there. We put vowels in there to translate it, but there was no vowels on this period. So MDW means to speak. Maquette means after. Last ground rule for intellectual work is to do maquette, speak to the after. We don't learn for the sake of learning just to be smart. The purpose of Africana intellectual work is to do what? Speak to the after, meaning what? Do all that you can now while you are alive so that in your absence, your work speaks for your on your behalf. There was a ceremony that was conducted for folk when they died in the Nile Valley. It was called the opening of the way. And one of the words they would use is ma'akaru, or of good voice. In other words, we can send this person up to the other side knowing they spoke and lived a good life, spoke to the after. And so the final part of intellectual work, this is not about arrogance, it is do good, read and write, be present, so that your efforts on this side speaks for you when you are on the other side, hopefully, right? You have a safe passage to the other side, Madu Maquette. We think about it. Within African societies, believe no one's truly dead until they stop calling your name. One of my greatest fears is what? 2 generations from now, my great-grandchildren ain't saying Papa. Because I did so much trash in my life, nobody want to whisper it. It's like Voldemort, right? He who should not be mentioned. And within African society, they believe you ain't dead until someone stops calling your name. So if you Madu Maquette, if you speak to the after, there will always be someone calling your name. All right. Any questions before we get started? Yes, no? We good on that? All right. I'm trying to get this so I can see y'all. And okay, let's talk about colonization before we move forward. We're gonna unpack this, kind of reverse engineer it, I guess, before we get to Sankofa. Dr. Ani said, until you understand white supremacy, everything after that, everything up until that point will confuse you. So our job today is to be unconfused. We're going to kind of get rid of the noise. So when we get to Sankofa, we're like, oh, okay, good. All right. Brilliant African scholar out of Kenya, Dr. Thiong'o, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. His brother was so bad, he refused to he refused to write in English to have his books translated. He said, no, I'm gonna write them in my traditional language. Y'all do the translation into y'all's, but what won't be lost is what I was trying to say. It may be lost in translation, but I'm not gonna lose it trying to convert it into y'all. But he talks about colonialism a whole lot. Important book that you might want to write down. We use it in a couple of my classes, in particular Humanities 180, is his Something Torn and New. And this comes from that book, Something Torn and New by Dr. Thiago. There's no region, no culture, no nation today that has not been affected by colonialism and its aftermath. Indeed, modernity can be considered a product of colonialism. What Dr. Thiago is trying to ground our understanding is most of what we understand comes through the lens of colonialism, white supremacy, imperialism. No matter how benign it may seem. When you center yourself as the beacon of the world, by extension, the way the world sees themselves will be through your lens. Something as simple as within your classroom from probably a young age, I don't know if they're still teaching it as much, but we was always taught to do what? Sit at the front of the class so the teacher would know you. So you would seem like an honorable student. That comes from colonialism. That's the Socratic model of what? The smarter the student, the closer they get to be to the who? Instructor. When you look at the model of how many African nations would teach, it would be what? In a circle. We are what? All equal. You can't, and also what? You can't hide here. There's a term we use in Black studies called mbongi, a room without walls, or an open space where the community was invited. Imagine if CCP and other universities were like an mbongi. In other words, if you live in this community, you have access to the space. I know Corey recording, but I'm gonna say it anyway. This is why I tell my students all the time. You got people in your family want to come to my class. I can't speak for other classes. Tell them to meet me in the lobby. We'll bring them to the classroom. Why? How are you gonna keep people out of this community from learning? One class semester, whatever. In other words, mbongi. But what is Thiago's point? In order to understand what we need to understand about ourselves, we got to what? Decentralize colonialism, Western imperialism. We could talk about capitalism and all this other stuff later, not today. All right, we'll look at one of the most intrusive things that colonization has done is use language as a means of control. Thiago in the book, Something Torn and New, talks about these three moments. And Brother Leroy's on here, so I ain't gonna put him on the spot, but he could probably explain this because we talked about this in detail in a couple of classes. But the first is dismemberment. And he talks about the dismemberment happening in two parts, a literal dismemberment or decapitation, right? And then this figurative dismemberment, to literally remove yourself from your body. Body is metaphor in this case. Body is represented as the cultural silo of who you are. This dismemberment. What does it mean to not recognize who you are and not be able to have the words anymore, language to express that? And then he talks about the second part of linguicide and lingua fam. And if we look at the end of these expressions, then we get understanding of what he means about the language, right? The lingua fam, when we think about famine, there's sometimes forced famine. What he looked at in this chapter in the beginning was what the English did to the Irish. The scorched earth syndrome, meaning we will starve them out. Remember, the Irish was one of the earliest colonies of the English, way before they crossed the Atlantic and say, you know what, or go to Africa and then say we're gonna cross the Atlantic and we're gonna enslave people who don't look nothing like us. The Irish were considered to be the what? The white slaves. You can watch the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Gangs in New York. Just the first 30 minutes, you get on, all white people didn't bang with each other in the beginning of this nation. There was a pure race, right? Of these English, we could say we could trace ourselves back to our motherland. Y'all Irish was our slaves back home, and y'all gonna remain our slaves here. But Thiago talks about the colonization of language in terms of lingua franca. We will starve the language out. Every 10 years or so, we get a new article in the New York Times or the Post that talks about these are the last 5 people who speak this traditional language in this part of the world. And then linguicide, where you completely exterminate that language. There's no tracing of it. And what does language have to do then with colonization? Well, how do you speak to your mother if you don't have the words to express how you feel? If she doesn't speak your new language? In other words, what? What happens when you are divorced from the language that expresses your culture? Right? Language is the silo of culture. And we'll use a very superficial expression. And Corey could probably attest to this, coming from outside of Philly. Explain to somebody outside of Philly what the word John means. If you're from Philly, you don't even think about it. I've just been hearing this at the crib, right? Since I was a pup. Well, John is everything. What do you mean? Word can't be. It is. It can be negative and positive. It can be gender specific or not, right? Matter of fact, a good sister from Temple is doing her research on the word John and how it's used as a derogatory word towards Black women, right? Very important research. But what happens if you don't have the words to convey how you feel? What is lost there? If language is the silo of culture, meaning language holds your identity of how you understand the world, and you no longer have the words to express that, and then something is replaced with that, what happens when those words are replaced and those languages and ideas are replaced with that of the colonizer? Well, then it takes us back to Thiango's point. Everything has been affected by colonialism. All right, let's move on. Mudumi, a Nigerian brother, said the geographic expansion of Europe and the civilization submitted the world to its memory. If we go back to our opening title page, we talked about remembering. And Mudumi is saying Western imperialism submitted the world to its memory. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, we use it in romantic terms like, I don't remember my life before you. In other words, this thing was so momentous, the memories that I held before are now embellished with this life that you and I have created. Good. Sometimes we suppress memories for our own benefit and for others. But what does it mean when you are submitted to the memory of another nation? Another way of saying that is what? I made you. Anybody ever tell you that before? Man, I made you. I ain't talking about your parents. Maybe we let that one slide. You ever been in a relationship with somebody? Some of y'all may be guilty of this. I ain't gonna put you on the spot. I'm saying what? You wasn't nothing before me. We may not say it that blunt. The idea is like, yeah, I put you down with that, right? But what does it mean when you are submitted to the memory? And with memory comes the culture and the language. What does it mean when you are submitted to that? It's almost as though you don't remember a time before that. So if you don't have a point of reference to what? Depart out of this, how do you know how you're being guided? Lastly, the name that I always hold up who's responsible for my academic intellectual work was Dr. Greg Carr, a brother down at Howard University. He's the reason why I started majoring in Black studies. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. He said, yeah, I got my JD, but what really got me through life is having this Africana PhD. I didn't even know you can get a PhD. I didn't start CCP until I was 27 years old. I didn't know what a PhD was, right? I was just trying to take care of my daughter, as Biggie said. I mean, literally, I was trying to think, what job can I get that's going to let me keep me out of child support court? If any of y'all have been there, you understand, right? But Dr. Carr, who's down at Howard University, he's the chair of the Afro-American Studies Department down at Howard University. He always reminds us when it comes to memory, you can't solve contemporary problems without memory. I get students all the time emailing me or asking me stuff in class. What do you feel about Dr. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so or Sister So-and-so? I don't argue contemporary problems unless we're going to talk about what? The precedent prior to it. You can't solve contemporary problems without memory, meaning what? First, you got to what? Decouple yourself from the memory that you've been submitted to. Then do the heavy lifting of learning what those things that you need to redeposit so they become your memories, which involves ritual, routine, and practice. And then you need to open up the way for these memories to inform the decisions you make going forward. And we don't mean this in a superficial way. We don't mean this in like an esoteric way. We mean this in our day-to-day ways in which we do things as Black folk or people of color for the larger population on this call. So we can't argue this moment. It's like arguing last summer's uprising, like when Black folk get themselves together. And if you ain't arguing, if we ain't talking about 1492 and the imperialism project that led us to this moment, then we can't solve this problem. At least go back 100 years, right? At least go back to Haiti. Okay, Black folk did rise. I mean, we have to have a moment that is our memory that informs these contemporary problems. Because if not, what? We think we done made this thing up. And I don't mean in a fictitious way, meaning we think it started with us. That's what a lack of memory does, because you don't have a moment to connect yourself back. Let's look at the ways in which memory has been used by colonization, and then we'll get to Sankofa. Memory is repurpose of the colonized body. And this is just a rehash of basically everything we said up to this point. But what happens when you don't have memory of yourself and the colonizer has submitted you to their memory, and so now you see yourself through the eyes of the colonizer? You start rejecting your cultural norms. We can talk about expressions of talking white or speak proper English. That used to be my favorite. When we was coming up, that's what it was. Speak proper English, right? English is probably one of the worst languages you can learn. And I don't mean in terms of mastery. English can't even stand on itself. English is a bastard language, right? It's a little bit of French, a little bit of Latin, a whole lot of German, and a couple other things. You take any of those out and you ain't got it no more. Have somebody who don't speak English learn English, be like, why is this so difficult? Why do these 5 words sound the same and they mean 5 different things? Why? Because you're limited. Let's just start with the language. We look at Black folk. I use this example. In terms of the Remembering Project, one of the things that you have to do is you have to learn the language of your master. And we can look at this literally in terms of enslaved Africans that were brought to this country. Last, remember, there was those stopping points along the way as well. The least amount of enslaved Africans that were brought to this quote unquote New World were brought to North America. You know, we'll talk about the sugarcane fields and parts of this world, who was working those, or who was being forced to work those, the labor on those places as well. But we can take a word like ashy. We all understand ashy, yes? Cool. When they sell you lotion on television, what's the word they use? Ashy or dry skin? Ashy don't exist without the phenomenon of Black people trying to explain what is going on with their skin in this new environment. And the way it was explained to me, and this may be folklore, but I'm gonna walk it down the end of the road, in other words, because it makes the point. If coal that looks like you turns into ash and you don't have a word to explain in this new environment why your body is so dry and it's turning a different color that it didn't back home because you was in a coastal region, and now you work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, and you don't have the proper nutrients and even your food to supplement this loss of certain things, and now you need to make sense of it. What? Words come from phenomena. The necessity to explain something that you don't have a word to explain. So if the coal, and you understand the word ash, right? Coal turns to ash and coal looks like you, and now your skin is looking like ash. Well, okay, now I'm ashy. It becomes an adjective. There's certain words in the English language that don't exist without Black folk who were enslaved trying to make sense of it. We can look at Mr. Bojangles and the word copacetic. Copacetic ain't no word that we had before. He said, listen, and what is a word? A word is a word because we agree that it's a word. That's it. I'm old. I didn't understand what no cap meant. Right? When I was coming up, no cap mean like I ain't capping you up, I ain't lying to you. And my students like, no, it's the same thing, mean like I ain't lying. But now we just gonna cut off the I ain't capping you up, no cap. A word is a word because we decide it's a word. All right, we come up and teach you ain't no such word as ain't. Well, when I'm home and in my neighborhood, we use the word ain't. So what are you telling me about what this word is? We've all agreed that it's a what? A word. So what does memory to the colonized body do? Well, one of the first things it tells you to do is what? Divorce yourself from your mother tongue. What happens when you divorce yourself from your mother tongue? Well, less you use it, less and less. The utility of it is not necessary anymore because the next generation needs to learn what? The colonized language to what? Survive. So there's no harm in learning it because what did Black folk do with it? They mastered English. They didn't forget their old language. They mastered English to the point of what? Content mastery allows you to do what? Improvise. They created a language on top of English called what? Ebonics. Ebony phonics. This is how we understand this word. You talking about time and space, how black people say time and space? You can see 1,000 memes today before you get off Instagram about what black folk mean when they say I'm right around the corner. The idea, the cultural identity is in that. How black folk understand time. When I was in Ghana, spent 6 months in Ghana, a brother told me, I apologize the first time, man, I'm sorry for being late. He said, it ain't about being on time, it's about being in time. It's about rhythm. He said, everybody can dance, brother, but not everybody got rhythm. African time is about rhythm. Meaning what? Okay, the party started at 8 o'clock. Yeah, okay, cool. First of all, I ain't even getting dressed at 8 o'clock because I know they're going to still be setting up at 8:30. And the guest of honor ain't coming till 10 because what? I know all y'all Negroes going to be late as well, and I'm not coming before y'all. Y'all going to see me when I come in, but that is what? Right on time. That's rhythm. So when you don't have the language, when memory has been deposited on your body as a colonized subject, you got to create words and ideas to express your cultural norms. So what is it, CPT, color people time? That is very much true. And I don't mean be late to an interview. Oh, Dr. Love said I'm in time. No, that's not what I'm saying. The other purpose of language is to understand the usage of it for the appropriate time. That's also understanding rhythm, all right? Let's look at, we'll quickly look at this. This is Edmund Spenser. He was a poet, but he was sent by the English to Ireland to use literature to commit linguafam and linguicide, to use literature to erode the Irish cultural norms. Now, why is this important? Think about the books you read in high school. Think about the books you read in elementary school. Think about the books you read in middle school. What worldview is being expressed through the literature? We've heard this term, the canon, right? These are the books you should read. And if you ain't read these, then you don't. What is being imagined in there? It is reimagining the world for you. This is not conspiracy. An entire nation used literature to colonize another entire nation. Because what happens? If we are the deposits for where you receive education from, and the literature that you are reading is not about your world, but about ours, what are you going to do with your memory? Well, you are going to superimpose your memory onto this. Right? And if you want to understand this further, you can read a DJ, go watch a DJ's TED Talk, where she talks about the danger of the single story. And this is a Nigerian sister who said when she was growing up, she wanted to eat apples, and she wanted to write stories about snow, and they ain't had none of that stuff in there. Why? Because that's the literature that she was reading under an English-dominated education. All right, let's continue. Memory as removal of names. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I would be in these nonprofit rooms and spaces, and folk would be clowning black folk about their new names with the hyphens, and they naming their children after cars and all this other stuff, right? One of the things that the English did to the Irish was remove their surnames. So you no longer had the Max and the Mix, and you could not connect yourself to a longer legacy of people. The same process was done to enslaved Africans. You no longer, we think about Malcolm X, right? He got rid of his slave name. We use this expression all the time. But the idea, imagine when you get to the end of where your name come from, you arrive as someone who owned your people. And so when Thiago says the loss of name links us to a loss of memory, it helps break, or in this instance, weaken the Irish resistance to the settlers. Meaning, I can't call on the names of the people who fought against y'all. So what was enslaved Africans doing? One of the things they would do is name their child my own. That's one way. Do you know how political that is? I know I don't own you because the slave master owns you, but I'm going to call you my own. You my child. Or at the end of the Civil War, going into Reconstruction, black folk were taking the surname of what? Freeman. Imagine never being free, and the only thing that you want people to know about you is I'm a free man. We can think about Morgan Freeman. That comes out of what? A political consciousness of memory. I don't know what my great-great-grandparents' last name was anymore. I don't know what nation I was a part of, but I know I'm what? I'm free. And so when Black folks start renaming their kids Mercedes or Shaniqua, it is part of that same reclamation project. What? I'm going to force you to learn my child's name. This is my child. Because Mary ain't quite doing it. Right? And so we could put 3 hyphens and 2 dots, anything I want. Why? Because this is my own. Because we freemen. It is part of that same reclamation project. Well, you can't get a job. All right, cool. Ask that to any of the other Irish immigrants, English immigrants, Eastern European immigrants were coming here and were told the same thing. Ask the Italians in particular. You ain't gonna be able to get no job with that name. That ain't your problem, right? It is the problem of what? White supremacy. All right, let's move on. Memory is body canvas. Well, these are literal branding mechanisms that were put on enslaved people to identify you as the property of some owner. And so while we could say, yeah, well, we're not literally branded now on our bodies, we want to use this to pivot ourselves to consider what does it look like when the larger state system, we can look at the prison system, we can look at the penal system, we can look at the police system. What does it mean when your body is not your own anymore? You know it's yours, but what does it mean when it comes under the scrutiny of those who can what? Render you separate from your body? What happens when people can see your body as a threat to them? Your personhood is a threat to them and can separate you from your life. What memories are inscribed through this branding to this day that are perpetuated that says you, even yourself, is not yours? And then lastly, we'll look at intended amnesia, and we'll use the fictitious character of Kunta Kinte to make this point. When we look at Kunta Kinte and his refusal to accept the name Toby, because Kunta Kinte is connected him back to his rites of passage program, connected him back to his family program, connected him back to the nation that he came out of. And the intention of amnesia by inflicting pain upon his body until he accepted the name of Toby. What is it, intended amnesia? What does it look like now? And this is a question that we have to consider. How is our memory being forced out of us through intended amnesia? Again, not conspiracy theory. We're not actually to lift up rocks to find these answers. Think about the world in which we exist as men, as Black men, as men of color, and how our identities about who we're supposed to be is forced upon us as opposed to us coming through this natural progression of what manhood truly is in all of its facets. And then lastly, with memory, if we go through all this and we say, okay, good, I'm going to reclaim memory, institutional memory, family memory. I may even learn an African language. Memory necessitates responsibility. And what do we have here? We have an image of brothers and sisters who are bringing these small caskets back to New York. In New York, it's called now the African slave burial grounds, where they were building one building. They found these mass graves in New York. Black folk were not allowed to be buried inside the city that were enslaved. So they were putting these mass graves outside the city. They said it's probably close to 20,000 bodies that were buried there. The community said, nah, y'all got to stop. They took the remains out to be documented, to be researched. Several of them were buried in caskets with Adinkra symbols, which will be talked about later. These Adinkra, these are not reflected. These were children necessarily. These were the remains and how they were able to identify what remains belong to what other remains. And so Ghana, the brothers and sisters in Ghana designed these caskets to be, for the remains to be deposited back in there. And they marched these things back to New York. And instead of building that building, it is now an African slave burial ground, which would probably be a great trip at some point when all this stuff out back up for CME to take. Right, what time do we have here? Okay, we ain't got a lot of time. Let me get moving. All right. All right, let's look at while we're here today. Sankofa, understanding Akan proverbs and Adinkra symbols. All right. So what I have here are several Adinkra symbols. Some of you may have seen these, right? Can you see them? You can see my mouse here, right? This is Gerima. All right. This talks about the supremacy of God. All right. This is representation of the creator. And we'll talk about all these in a minute. We have these Siamese, we have these connected crocodiles here. And the expression behind it is they share the same stomach. They are attached and share the same stomach, so they should not fight with one another. All right. We have this one here, which is the idea of love finds its way home. Love always finds its way home. Return. And then we'll look at these last two here. These two are what brought us here today. And we'll talk about a third one as well, the Sankofa symbols. All right. So first we have this one here, the clearly more recognizable one of this bird that we see. The bird is in flight, meaning it is moving forward. Sometimes the bird is represented with a small jewel here, or pearl, some have said, or just it's represented by some round jewel. The bird is looking back to this thing of value while still moving forward. The idea behind of Sankofa is there's something in your past of value that you must go and get while you can still continue to move forward. But your forward mobility will improve based upon you reclaiming this thing of value. So let's talk about the Proverbs a little bit. We talked about it in the opening. What do we mean by Proverbs within this, the Akan system of Adinkra symbols? So instead of writing words, you would represent them through these symbols. If you go to Adinkra.org or one of these things, you'll see there's a litany of Adinkra symbols that represent proverbs. These are not just illustrations. Think about bebop in this moment in jazz. It's coded language. Back to the beginning, the wise one is spoken to in Proverbs. To the foolish one, they can't even be explained. So you could just see this and understand. Or if your homie tripping off the bag with you, you could just slap this Adinkra symbol down for instance, yo, we sharing the same stomach. And in other words, what? Everybody got to what? Eat. And so when we look at Sankofa in terms of memory and history and its importance, Sankofa is reminding us it is not of our fault that we don't know this history. But once we are mindful of it, it becomes our responsibility to do our due diligence to unearth it and to take it serious. Let's look here. I'm going to show y'all some modern ideas of it, but I want to talk about cultural continuity and how we arrive at these moments because somebody before us did this work so that we could be talked about. And we have two individuals here. Last names are both Simmons, but they're not related. They're both out of South Carolina. The elder over there, well, they're both elders in this picture, but the brother sitting here with the anvil is Peter Simmons. He was born into slavery, meaning what? His moment of inception said you're going to be owned by someone who's probably not going to be your parents. But much like we know, enslaved folk, including the first wave of Africans who were forced to this country, built this nation. We could talk about the cowboys. We could talk about, let's just look at South Carolina, for instance. There is no rice in America as an industry unless you talk about the Igbo in South Carolina who knew how to grow, cultivate, and sustain rice plantations. Why? Because they were doing it back home. Rice grows on water. And so when they came here to sustain themselves nutritionally, they were growing rice on water. There's a whole process. You got to let the dirty water out. You're doing this on water, much like cranberries, right? You're doing this on water, not in the ground. Rice don't come out the ground. South Carolina, the Igbo people out of Nigeria primarily were growing rice. They also introduced the dye or the color indigo blue that they were using back home. They were also When you look at the history of cowboys and who were the first cowboys or these herdsmen, it was the Igbo. The first cowboy, it was a derogatory term to call somebody a cowboy. They were herdsmen who herded the cows. These were the enslaved folk. So this gentleman here, Peter Simmons, comes from people who understood how to manipulate iron ore to the utility and to your needs. This is who he was. Then we have Philip Simmons here, South Carolina, was raised by his parents until he was about 8, and they sent him to Charleston. Some of y'all old enough to remember Gullah Gullah Island. The cartoon was, it was live action on Nickelodeon. The Gullah folk. In Philadelphia, there used to be a restaurant up until 10 years ago called Geechee Girls. And then one of the main dishes they served was rice. Well, the Gullah people were those people, the Igbo people, who held on to their native traditions. You go there now, they speak a language called Gullah. Philip Simmons was one of those people. Was raised by his grandparents till he was 8. Sent to Charleston, lived with his parents. He comes out under the tutelage of Peter Simmons. He teaches him everything he knows about iron melting, manipulation of iron. Philip Simmons becomes world renowned for his ability to make art out of iron. This is just one of his. And why am I showing you this? When we talk about memory, how do you put coded language, or how do you reinscribe? When we go back here and it says memory necessitates responsibility. Well, how do you pin words into the future? Remember we talk about the African intellectual work is reading and writing. How do you write your memory into the future? Well, let's go back to Sankofa. We see Sankofa here, yes? Okay, this is the other expression of it. Some of y'all probably see these in your neighborhood still. Has anybody ever seen these before? How have you heard me? You ever seen these before? How is Black folk writing themselves into the future? How is Black folk leaving markers of who they were, of their language? How is Black folk saying, we may not be there when you get there, but we're going to remind you there's something that you need to go back and get. This is a memory project. It's right out in the open, so to speak. West Philly, North Philly, South Philly, you still see these. This is not happenstance. Now, maybe we say today, okay, well, it don't matter if you know what you're doing when you make this now. The idea is, so we talking about going across the Atlantic to a group of people in the Akan who said, we're going to come up with expressions to denote a whole system of understanding the world. This one means go back and get it. Go back and fetch it. Sankofa. And so when we talk about the Reclamation project of memory with Sankofa, it is a collective, but also individual. In other words, meaning what? What is of value to you? What is importance to you that you need to go back and reclaim? In your quiet moments, what are the things that are missing that will make you a full person? Right? I'm about to turn 50 in a few years. And I said, listen, I'm going to be a full human being by the time I'm 50. All the trauma, everything else in my life that I dealt with, I'm going to do everything I need to. So when I'm 50, I can be fully human. In other words, what? I ain't got nothing holding me down. What is your individual project? And that involves, for me, Sankofa as well. Right? I don't know if y'all know, what was that movie with Andy Dufresne in it? Shawshank, right? Jay Electronica, one of the greatest MCs to walk the planet, talks about it, right? He uses Andy Dufresne talking about his own, with one of his songs, I can't remember. But in other words, he had to travel through all that muck to get free. Like this 6 football fields, whatever he had to travel through, he did all that to stand free. And Jay Electronica said that's what he had to do, right? He said, I'm Andy Dufresne with this. In other words, what is the thing that you need to go through, that you need to go back and disengage, go back to understand what is your Sankofa moment that allows you to stand free on the other side? And that's the individual pursuit. The collective pursuit is, what is the work that you got to do for your family and your community? So that you can what? Again, we go back to this original idea, Madu Maquette. What is your responsibility while you are here to speak to the after? To Ma'akaru, so that when you transition and they open your mouth and say, the opening of the way, this person's mouth was of good voice, or he spoke good. The meta-nectar, divine speech, right? The meta-nefer, this good speech. This person was of good speech. How do we express that now? Well, when I was coming up, we would say a word is bond, right? What I'm saying, you can bank on. It bonds us. We can talk about Nomo, also of the Akan, the regenerative power of the spoken word, right? We heard, man, don't even bring him up. Don't even speak him into existence. Or somebody call you while you're thinking about, man, you're going to live a long life. I was just thinking about you. In other words, what? Words have power. Within the Judeo-Christian belief system says what? God said in the beginning was what? The word. Right? There's a Greek word, briefos. Briefos, which means before speech. In other words, while in the womb, a child can be taught before speech. So even before you can speak, memory and ideas are being implanted into you before you arrive on this side. What is your responsibility to speak into existence in your absence when you are no longer here of this reclamation project? Because we remember in the beginning, we said the idea of Sankofa as it relates to history is of importance. It's of value. Well, let's take a look. Once we'll step out and then we'll come back to what a possible project looks like. 1992, 93, this movie came out. This brother here, Ethiopian brother, Haile Gerima, taught at Howard University for years, just retired, maybe about 3 years ago, has a shop across the street called Sankofa Cafe. My aunt, she said, I'm gonna take you to see a movie today. I was about 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. She said, I'm gonna take you to see a movie. I didn't know anything about Haile Gerima, of course, definitely know anything about the word Sankofa. We went to see this movie, Sankofa, 69th Street. No movie company wanted to distribute the movie, wanted to produce the movie, wanted to fund the movie. Haile Gerima did it off the rip, funded it himself with the support of his community. He had one reel of the film. This is before digital. 1993, we talking about, well, when he was filming it, probably 90, 91. I don't know how long he was filming it for. It was released in 92, 93. He had one reel of the film. He would travel from city to city in the United States, go to Black communities, rent out a theater in a movie theater until Black folks stopped coming, take his reel and go to another one. My aunt takes me to 69th Street. This one, 69th Street was dirty. It's probably dirty again. The movie theater, right? It's when people used to laugh like rats go beneath your feet, but clearly it was the cheapest movie theater. There's some pragmatic concern when you ain't got no money and you try and get this thing out too, right? So I'm going to go to the cheapest movie theater, but still in the Black community, Black folk going to come out to it. I sat in a movie, understood the storyline, but didn't understand anything else, the nuance of the movie, not even the movie making, just the nuance of what I was told. This sister's here named, she is the main protagonist in the film. She goes through the Sankofa moment. She's in Ghana as a model when the movie opens, and then she's whisked away to a plantation in the Caribbean because she has to remember. When she's in Ghana, she's arrogant. She's looking down at the other African people, blah, blah, blah. She has no memory. Her memory has been reinscribed with that of the colonizer. And then she's whisked away into the past to a plantation in the Caribbean to a family owned by the Lafayettes. And she's still in denial about who she is until she has this Sankofa moment within the moment of enslavement. This part here that we have here is towards the end of the film. I'm not going to ruin it for y'all. Very important film to watch. 25 years has passed since this movie has come out. I'm hoping at some point we can raise enough money for Haile Gerima to digitize this, remaster it, and put it out in another format, digital format, so it could be a wider audience. But if you know anything about Haile Gerima, this brother don't play about people trying to get his stuff. His kids used to go on YouTube weekly to pull it down if they saw it up there, right? His son, actually, who's worth following as well, Marawi Gerima, just came out with a movie last year called Residue. I think it's on Netflix still. It deals with gentrification in DC. A beautiful film. But you want to watch that, because maybe we can screen this, man. When we all back together, we can screen this, all right? But 3 years ago, around the 25th anniversary, I was trying to get Gerima to come to CCP. We just couldn't work it out, hoping we could screen it and do something. But maybe we could do this with a CME or a broader audience of brothers at some point when we all back in person, all right? And I just wanted to pivot here to show you that the idea of Sankofa is known within communities to the point where Gerima makes an entire film about this notion. A beautiful, beautiful film. It's what Roots could not do in terms of showing enslaved resistance, especially not just the American South, because this is so important in the Caribbean. And it shows this European expansion through imperialism, not just in the American South, not just in the North, but throughout the world. We're talking about sugarcane here. One of the major things used with sugarcane, of course, we know sugar, but also rum. And I always tell students when we talk about this, when you go to the Caribbean, you go into these tours, don't go to those rum tours. There's blood in the fields of enslaved people who were forced to labor to produce rum and sugar and its byproducts for the rest of the world, were whipped, enslaved, chained, and killed. All right. And we can talk about the other side of that, the Maroonage project of Black folk who left and ran away. They didn't just run away temporarily. When we talk about Maroonage, we talking about people who ran away and created their own society. You could talk about Nana, the Maroons in Jamaica, up in them Blue Mountains fighting the British to the point where the British said, you know what? Enough. You got it. Just stay up there. We're going to stay over here. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but the idea is because they couldn't leave these islands, they had to go into the mountains, to other places, to the caves, to the hills, etc. And they marooned. They created their own societies again. Same thing Black folk doing to this day. All right. Let's look at this project here. This is the good brother Wallo. Put him up here for a couple reasons. We know Wallo 267. This is 4 years since the brothers was been out, or 20 years. Unfortunately, he's not off parole until 2048. Now he's working to get off parole, right? For the slightest insurrection, he can go back to serve the rest of his time. But after 20 years, he got out. And 4 years ago this week is the anniversary when he got, actually he posted one of his first videos about a week after he got out. He had the $1,000, I'm turning to $100,000.
That was powerful, bro.
Listen, I am not mad at him, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that Wallo figured out while he was still inside is, man, if you got a phone, you could do a whole lot of stuff. And so he has his own project that he's undertaking with his book. And I'm glad to see him and his cousin linked back up. Not that they never were not linked up, but they brought their unique way of seeing the world together as well, right? But what I want us to think about today is how do we use Sankofa in terms of memory, and how can we use this as a project that we can undertake using just something as simple as our phones, right? Well, if we said memory necessitates responsibility, what is the responsibility of institutional memory? In other words, what is the memory of the institutions that we come out of? Religious institutions, education, academic institutions, community institutions, our family as institution. And when I was thinking about gentrification in terms of this project, what are the memories that are being erased because of gentrification? Fred Hampton Jr., we were talking about Judas earlier and the Black Messiah. His father, of course, was portrayed in that film. Fred Hampton Jr., we were on, I was on a discussion with one of the sisters who produced the movie this week. And she mentioned that Fred Hampton Jr. said, we got to start using the correct words. He said, we don't use gentrification, right? We got to call it what it is, the new imperialism. And I'm paraphrasing, so I know I'm getting part of it, but we'll use gentrification for the purpose of the study. In other words, we're going to come in and what? Implant memory into this community. One of the things we talked about was murals when Corey and me and the other brothers was talking about this. Murals within Philadelphia is a big thing. Murals within our community is a big thing. And I'm not talking about the one necessarily through mural arts, not knocking them at all. But I'm talking about the murals that go up from the community in recognition of people who've lost their lives and people who have done good equally. What happens when someone sees an empty lot and said, I'm going to build a house there, and they cover up that mural? That memory is gone in terms of what that mural represents.
That's on Broad Street. They did it on Broad and like Masters.
Oh, yeah.
It was the fight in Muhammad Ali.
Blue Horizon. The Blue Horizon.
And they just built a whole big ass building. And I seen it drive by. I'm like, damn, I forgot that was even there.
Temple said, give me that. Give me that, right? And if you look at the history of that Blue Horizon, the sister who owned that is also the same sister who owns what? The Paul Robeson House. We talk about institutional memory in West Philly. This is a sister who knows this is a sister with memory. Right? So what is the institutional memory of the people in your family? We'll start with the elders. Because John Henry Clark said what? If you got an elder in your community, you got a walking library. You got people who know. Right? And I'm talking about people who know all the dirt on people first. They'll tell you that first. Well, you know, so-and-so wasn't really a good mother, right? I mean, they got that, but they also got the other things. Who the elders in your family, within your religious family, within your community that hold the institutional memory? How do we get that memory recorded before they transition? Well, research, request, and record. Do your research first. What do you want to talk? I'm talking about on all these levels, right? Within your family, your immediate family, your religious family, community, any other institution that you find yourself a part of. Do your research first. Don't waste nobody's time by coming to them with the easy questions that they done answered a million times. Go back to the groundwork of the ground rules for intellectual work. Be present, read, and write. Do your research first. Don't go in seeking all the answers. Go in seeking the answers that you don't have the answers to through your research. You ever see somebody online you like? What's the first thing we start doing? We start going through all their pictures. Then we cross-link that to the people in their picture. Boom, boom, boom. Then we know how to do the research. So this is the easy part. Because there's value in that. Then we slide in the DM, so to speak, right? There's value in that. Well, the same process can be undertaken with this institution memory and this reclamation project. Do your research and then requests. What do we mean by that? Ask them, can I talk to you? Be explicit in your terms. I'd like to talk to you once a week. I'd like to talk to you an hour, a month, whatever it is. Also explain how and why. Ain't nobody want to be on camera, especially in the modern world, not knowing where their idea is and where what they're talking about is going to end up at. Well, I would just like to give this back to the community. I would like to, whatever the case is, I would like this to be on file at our mosque. I would like this to be a file, whatever it is, explain to them how what they're going to be talking about, how it's going to be used in the future. Make sure you show it to them first. You got a family reunion on the 4th of July? Black folk ain't in the parade. So when we back home barbecuing, show it, right? You about 2 people removed from getting a projector and a screen. Show it in your neighborhood. And then technology. All you really need is this. It ain't got to be glamorous. Why? Why we know this? Part of our institution memory from my generation was just what? Photo albums. What is the purpose of this? Well, we're talking about Sankofa in the moment in which we find ourselves today. How do we take note of this moment and connect it to the moments before this? It doesn't have to solve the world's problems, but it leaves a marker for the next generation to come, to pick up the mantle, to be passed the baton so they can continue this work. I mean, the only reason we're here is because somebody stayed alive long enough for us to be here. And I'm talking about generations of people. Somebody held the line. Somebody gave enough resistance so that our way through will be a little bit easier. But the responsibility and the work isn't any less. It just means our approach to it, we ain't got to be completely bogged down. I mean, when you read these folk from SNCC and other civil rights movements, they used to sand the side of their cars down so the glare wouldn't show. When the police would come in, they were driving through these corners. We ain't got to do that. We might have something equally serious to do, but we ain't got to do that. We don't have to have CBs in our car telling you, I'm 3 blocks away. I'm going to need you to cut this cop off because they chase. No, we ain't got to do that. But we do have to hold the line. We do have to be the vanguard now. And how do we do this? Well, one way is talk to the folk and let them know your experiences, individual, these community experiences are of value before they are extinguished. Again, we go back. My neighborhood is called Brewery Town now. I used to live on the other side of Francisville. We used to call it Cross Tracks. They don't even mention those names anymore. If you go 2 generations removed from me, what happens when you can't call out to the place that you came from? So part of the reclamation project of this Sankofa project that I'm encouraging y'all to do is, man, get your phones out, get a tripod if you want to be that bull, and start recording people. Talk just at your family. And now some folk ain't gonna want to talk about the horrible things. They ain't there. Don't push them for that. That's not what I'm saying. Any memories that you get will allow you to connect the other. And what is the beauty of this? What you start seeing is threads that connect people from even different communities, different religious backgrounds that are Black in this nation or non-white in this nation that we are dealing with, resisting, and surviving some of the same circumstances. And it ain't all just about the bad. We are experiencing some of the same joyous moments as well. All right, that's all I got, man. I would love to talk to y'all. Take any questions you may have, etc. Thank y'all so much.
Appreciate you, Dr.
Hey, Leroy, where you at, Leroy? Oh, there you go, bro. Looking all
What's
sharp
up?
always, man. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, bro.
Anything, thank you, brother Albert. I appreciate it, man. We all on fire, man. Y'all hear me, you hear all the folk who told me this is what to do, right? When Michael Jackson rode up to James Brown funeral, he said, no James Brown, no me. So this ain't my words. I'm speaking from all the voices of folk who I've sat with through, literally sat in their space or read their work. So
To a point that you made, Dr. L, Madhu Maquette speak to the after, right? Like anyone, like I'm one of Dr. L's students, so like it's like kind of cemented in my head at this point. But like it's not, I said to say it's not BS, right? I'll give you a literal example of Madhu Maquette, right? So before I like became a Black Studies major, first I came in contact with Dr. O's Primus and then Dr. L. And then Dr. Love, I wasn't a jazz fan at all. Like not one bit. I didn't know much about jazz. And Coltrane came across one day in a conversation. Now Dr. L does like a lot of work with Coltrane, John Coltrane. And just because of like, also I have an attachment to what he teaches me, but like the fact that I respect him and what he carries with him is the name of John Coltrane and how he makes sure that John Coltrane name lives on. Now I'm a fan of John Coltrane, right? And now I speak out on his name. I speak out on his name and I allow John Coltrane to keep going. And even to the point where like I'm expecting twins, right? And I like played John Coltrane on my wife's stomach and they started moving. She was like, oh, you gotta move. So like that's Madhu Maquette, right? Like keeping that name lasting forever. Feel me?
Appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, no doubt.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sitting there acting like I ain't know, but I'm just saying it from now. Just apparently you put it out in the public domain. So
I bet in the public now. It's in the public now.
No doubt.
Got a quick comment. Dr. Love, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
the
you,
presentation.
brother.
It was awesome. Definitely.
Thank you.
So when you were talking about your old neighborhood and when you go back or when you go around the way or even just driving through Philly, and since a kid, I've been all over Philly on the bus, the sub, the L,
No
wherever.
doubt.
And now you come back 20 years later, 25 years later, and you walking on the same streets that $500,000 houses are being built on.
Bro,
And well, I don't know about anybody else, but I kind of feel some type of way on the inside. I feel like these are my this is my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where I grew up at, where I walk,
Yep.
where I, had fun with my friends. But now it's all getting turned into something that you really don't know. So it just it kind of pierces something in me. Like I'd rather keep it black like we had it.
You know what you mean? I mean, man, I have Fred Hampton said to be a revolutionary is to be filled with contradictions, man. So I feel you. I mean, I'm right off of 29th and Thompson now, a little small street called Dover. I love this block. I've been here about 12 years now. If I moved out of my house now and moved back, I couldn't afford it. One, the corner of my block, 29th and Master, on Master Street, they put up a crib, $645,000. I mean, I just couldn't believe it, right? I mean, I saw the wave of gentrification when I moved in. The other side thing is, as a human being, as a black folk, we want the same things that gentrification provide, but without the arrogance of the people who move in and look at us like we ain't around here. You feel what I'm saying? So don't look at me like I ain't from around here. You ain't from around here. Now, and like what you need to do is start speaking to people and all these other things because that'll protect you from getting your hit. And I ain't advocating for violence at all. That's not what I'm saying. But when you move in and you put an 82-inch TV or whatever it is in your window, and the world you came from, y'all ain't put your blinds down. Black folk, we move that type of stuff in the middle of the night. You feel what I'm saying? It says you don't understand the cultural norms of that community, right? You need to, if you're going to stay here, you need to start like, and I ain't talking about like this paternalistic thing, start finding the poorest black person and you think I'm gonna give you some winter coats or no. We had one woman on our block a few years ago, they done fell in line now, who tried to, black folk, we have a party in the middle of the day for anything in the summertime, right? So-and-so birth, whatever it is, if you got fired, you'll pull out the speakers. The woman came out and said that they're too loud. And this was the middle of the day. I don't know what you need to do. Maybe you go in your back room. Maybe you go on your third floor that y'all had built, that y'all got a new, whatever you need to do. You don't come, because this been going on for 25, 30 years. Matter of fact, it's been going longer than that. His dad was the old DJ. You don't know that either, right? But you call the cops on us. You know what I mean? Because you protect it, because you go to your CDC meetings, all these other things. But I understand what you're saying, but I enjoy knowing I can walk around the corner and get coffee. All these things that I wanted, but I don't want it with the erasure of the folk who lived here either, man. So, yeah. Thank you for that, man. What part of Philly you in now? Or what part of Philly where you from?
Well, I'm from North Philly, right around 29th, 30th and Page Street, right around 30th and Diamond, Strawberry Mansion.
29th and
Brewery
Lehigh,
town.
man. 29th
Yeah,
and
so
Lehigh.
that Chinese store near Dover on the end of the block.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay.
It's been there for years.
I used to live on Oakdale Street.
Okay. It's like a 10, 15-minute walk, if that.
Yep. All right.
Indeed, real quick before folks start hopping off, students, please fill out the survey I put in the chat, especially students. But anyone can fill this one out. And also, if you haven't tracked your attendance, I know Marquis, I didn't see you on the attendance, but you've been here the whole time, so I appreciate you being here. Again, that $100 is that there's money waiting for you, so make sure you fill it out. But
Put my name on this.
But indeed, so I appreciate you, Dr. Love, not just for this, this workshop, but for your continued work at CCP. If students have more questions or want to take one of your classes or want to follow up, is there an email that they can reach out to?
Man, I'm gonna give y'all my phone number because it's easy to text me. If anybody know me, I hate email. So my number is 267-325-9007. Just text me, hey, this is so-and-so from CME, and then we can get down from there. All right. Don't text me at 10 o'clock. You know what I mean?
They know.
I was just talking to my homie. He's like one of our mutual young bulls. He said he be texting me 3 o'clock in the morning because he's hungry. He making his music. He hungry. But man, my wife be looking like, what's going on? Why somebody FaceTime me 3 o'clock in the morning? So, at 10 o'clock, I'm trying to chill, man. So, but if you text me, please say your name and just say CME, and then we can wrap. I call you. We can text whatever it is. We can DM whatever it is from that point. But if that first instance, probably best just to text me.
Indeed. And I know in the future, we're going to be linking with CME students. Mr. Bell, who's one of our core mentors, along with Mr. Davis, who you see here, had an idea of doing some sort of project similar to that, like the record research. I'm sorry, the research, the request and record. So making sure that because CME has a lot of dope folk that come through. And of course, their spirit never leaves, like you mentioned, like that never leaves.
Yeah.
We want to put that in a physical form where our students can look back and also put the utility of Sankofa into practice. So
I'll just drop this only because he gave me permission. My homie Cedric Miles, he lives in Brazil, but he's actually from South Carolina, Bennisonville. He has a Fulbright, right? The Fulbright that he wants to do, they put it on hold because of COVID, so they ain't dropping them checks down yet. But when it comes around, he wants to do something similar to what USC did, where they were doing these anthropology, digital anthropology, whatever, in the bag things. But he asked me if I could simulate something through my class at CCP. So he wants to do it. So we can maybe connect that way. He can come in and do a full lecture. He's finishing up his PhD at Tulane, but he come and do a lecture. But it's something that we maybe can get funding through what he's doing. And support his efforts of how he's trying to do this he's trying to mainly do it in South America, Central America, but he wants to test it over here. So it's the way that we could do it where he can do the instruction and stuff like that, lay out the blueprint, stuff like that, and help us with that process. But did you have Dr. P at Temple, Corey?
Peterson Lewis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I talked to her 2 weeks ago.
We learned this.
Near me.
Part of what I'm doing with this is what Dr. P did for us in grad school. This was our final project we had to do in grad school, part of our research project. So yeah.
Yeah, we did a podcast.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, like a short podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I have stories about her. Incredible.
Bro, listen, man. I ain't in no fraternity, and so I ain't equating my experience to this. But I felt haze going through her class. I had it twice, 3 times, matter of fact, because I was a major. So I had it 2 times in undergrad and once in the graduate. This system would give you a final, and you had to sign and say you weren't going do it with anybody else. She would come in the computer lab 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, checking to see who was in there working together, bro. I mean, she was bad, bro.
She threw an eraser at me once in class because I like asked a question and like when she does she was still talking. I asked a question. She threw an eraser at my head.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a joke, man. I mean, but her standard for excellence for Black students coming out of, for Black studies majors was high. I would say unachievable, but high.
Right.
He was not getting an A in her class.
Oh no. Oh no.
But easy A.
Cool. I appreciate you again, Dr. Love. Any last questions before we bounce? I'll turn over to Boss Man for any last words.
I
Justice, what's up?
I wanted to get together a Black conference like a year out, and really centered around Black stories, and then this two-parter where first is centered around Black stories. Like particularly, I remember at UPenn, there's this one student who's speaking out about his how he feels on campus. He was saying how he doesn't wear his school merch or his gear because he's a proud student at UPenn. He actually says that he has to wear it because he has to be identified as an actual student on campus. And a lot of people would stop him like, there's no way. They just could not see that he could be a student here. So him wearing his school gear is the best defense for him to understand that I'm a person who goes to the school. I earned my spot here. So, and then there's also like microaggressions in corporate world, especially particularly for Black women who are always facing microaggressions from coworkers, predominantly white coworkers who just don't have the education or the sensitivity training to understand this is not appropriate for a workplace. So that's like the first part. But the second part is also creating a network where we can connect with other Black institutions and organizations where we can keep ourselves and actually build an organization where we can actually network and connect with other Black individuals who are doing something for the community. And that's really like Black businesses, nonprofits, and so forth. And also, because for myself, I want to actually rebuild or really work towards, like Black Wall Street or, all that stuff, because that's been torn down from us. So I definitely want to work on a project, something like that, where we're centered around those two components and trying to build something so we can create that network. So I was wondering if I could connect with you to kind of like get some outlines or some feedback of how I should go about doing so.
Yeah, are you asking me, brother? I'm sorry. I didn't know if that was to the group. What?
Oh yeah, that was for you, Dr. Love.
Oh yeah, by all means, man. Definitely. Let's if you reach out to me, we could talk, and then we could. I mean, this is an ongoing project, of course. Yeah. But if we had a conference at CCP that begins to deal with these things, very specific topics, then yeah, definitely.
Indeed. And Justice, it sounds like you just gave us up a project, so
yeah,
we on it. But so before you be with Dr. Love, you and I and Shane, Pat, Al, Bossman, we can all link up and lay that groundwork and build it up. So when we bring it, to Dr. Love, it's not like in shambles, but we have something packaged so where we can provide him with some more info. So that's a great idea.
Sounds good.
All right, Bossman.
I had a question.
Marquis, what's up?
I wanted to ask, is that your real last name? Like Love?
Yeah, man.
Like you was born with that last name?
Yeah, bro. I would tell you, I wasn't born with my first name.
Yo, that's
my birth name. My parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, man. So they named me a very Christian name. My first name is Aaron. I went through a rites of passage program as a young adult and was given the name Anyabwile, which means God has unchained me. But my last name is Love, man. I always joke and say the only reason I got my PhD is so students can call me Dr. Love, man. But that's my last name. That's my father's last name. That was his father's last name. That's my last name, bro. Yeah, that's it. That's why Leroy, Black men, we get a little worried about it. So Leroy called me Dr. L most of the time because he ain't gonna call.
That's too much affection. Come on, now.
I ain't calling no grown man delicious or something like that. You know what I mean? That's
delicious.
Oh man. Name to call you. That's it, brother. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Indeed. Andre.
Yeah, that's good. I wanted to check. I'm not gonna lie. During the summertime, I was like, yo, that would be lit if I changed my last name to Love. Then yeah. So
go ahead, man. Go ahead.
You said something about like people like you not relating or just being in full contact of the mother language, I wanted to ask you if you think there was like a such thing as a father language.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we can get into the whole gender thing, right? Because now we probably have to say something else, right? And I'm in full agreement of wherever we go with that. But the idea of the mother, the who you're birthed from, right? And biologically, we still understand that to be just biologically women. I want to be clear about this. And that Naira Wahid, she's a poet out of Philadelphia. She has a book of poetry called Salt. And she has 3 poems in there dedicated to language. And one of them is where I pulled it from. It's like, I think she basically said, we are the hyphen in the African American, that thing that connects African to American. She said it comes from blood and bones, right? Mm-hmm. And when our mother calls out to us, we can't respond because we don't understand our mother's language. So to your point, this idea of mother is who birthed you. And with that birth, again, back to briefers, right? Where do you get the idea of who you are before even birth? It's from biologically the mother. Now, are we raised by our fathers and instructed and taught by our fathers? Yes. But even when we talk about the colloquial of like mother wit, right? This mother wit, where you get your wisdom from, we say mother, right? Because the understanding of who nurtures you at that kind of, I mean, we got to really give way to the understanding to carry a human being is something men will never understand. I mean, let's just be clear about that, right? You can't. To have a full person growing inside you, I don't understand that, right? Blows my mind. That is not to eliminate the responsibility role and what men go through during that process as well. But I don't know what it means to have the magic of a whole human in you, man. And you're going to put that human out into the world? Bro, I can't even begin to understand. Leroy case 2 human beings at once. I don't even understand.
Two. I still don't understand. Like, my wife is carrying
there's a father tongue, man. There's a father tongue, right? And I'm learning that even more. I have an older daughter. My daughter's 23, but we have a 6-year-old son, my wife and I. I'm learning that even more, the value and importance of what the father tongue is as well. And ideally, mother and father are in concert with each other. I mean, we speak in the same language, right?
Good question. Andre, one last question before we wrap up. And you're on mute if you are trying to talk, Andre. You are on mute still.
Yeah, pardon me. Listen, the struggle for me is always on. So I'm in the laundry room right now, but I ain't missed none of the conference since like 12:25. But I appreciate it. I feel like I know it's for all of us, but I can feel when you're speaking directly to me. First of all, from Brooklyn, I've seen the African burial ground. It was a mass grave of African people that were pushed into a mass grave. Mm-hmm. And to the contrary of that, they built the district attorney's new offices on that ground. Yep. So again, it was pretentious because it was like, where did all of these bodies come from? Mm-hmm. Yeah, where did they come from? Yep. We weren't told when they were put there, and then they tried to act like they didn't exist then. Yeah. And at some point, the people said, we're not doing that again.
They said enough.
So even in my poverty, run into somewhere where I could get more for my dollar to Philadelphia, the gentrification followed me here. Yeah. And what better way to gentrify a community if you incarcerate the strength of that community? So they still, you know what, the okie doke is still going on, brother. But I'm interested in taking your course, even if it's outside of CCP, because I'm moving on to another school.
Where you going, bro? You know?
I want to try to get into Drexel because engineering is my thing.
Okay, so, good stuff.
And I want to go somewhere where it's not so political. So, I mean, I came to CCP through the Veterans Upward Bound program at the University of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But when some people say, oh, you too radical, or guess what? I've been called angry, confrontational, and all. That's what, man. It's like, it's the names I choose to ignore. That's it. So people tell me that, then guess what? I'm not confrontational and rebellious enough. Yep. So that's where I am with it. And when I went to the brother that might have had problems at the Penn campus, tell them they can get my information from anybody that's seeing me and come holler at me because I don't wear no identifying nothing. Mm-hmm. I walk that campus because the reason why I live in West Philadelphia is because it reminds me of where I was born and raised in Bed-Stuy. I feel like I'm among cousins
No
So
doubt.
guess what? I'm home and other people are the visitors. So
Indeed.
that's what it is. Brother, I really appreciate it because
Salute,
it spoke to me on different levels, and I will be speaking to you in the future. Thank
Please do.
you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Be safe.
Cool. So last words, I'm gonna let Boss and Dr. Love close it out.
All right, so so brother L knows the kind of love I have for him, right?
No
And
doubt.
so
You
you
too,
already know, as soon as I knew that he agreed to be a part of this, I made sure that I was here, that I was present during the whole time,
Appreciate
in
it.
honor of him, but also in honor of the respect of those that have come before me and those that will come after me. And so what seeing me, and every time that he was talking, it just kept reminding me that seeing me is our reclamation project, right? This is our institutional history. So you are part of our legacy. And so what you do and what you choose not to do reflects on us in terms of how we are seen, not only today, but how we will be forever seen. So, generations from now, they should be saying CME and understand fully what that means. And everyone here has a part in that particular project, right? In terms of who we are and our ability to control our own narrative and not let anyone else speak our particular truths for that. So how you live, how you do, how you act, how you love each other is a reflection of that. So again, what Brother Love was talking about is exactly who we are as a CME. And so of course I appreciate him and everything that he's poured into us. And also too, I wanted major shout outs to, I think John had to left, Mac had to left, but of course our mentors, our elders, Ron Davis and Hayward Bell, who without this, without the work that we're doing, we would not be able to sustain ourselves. So in terms of when we talk about thinking about our history, please tap into these individuals, right? Because just in terms of just their presence alone, what we've been able to do as a community within the past 5 years is just outstanding. And so for all the CME members right now who have not applied for the S3 scholarship, so that Ron Davis and Hayward Bell had funded for CME students, right? Up to $10,000 in scholarships. We have 2 for scholarships for $2,500 for 2 students who are full-time and 2 for $1,250 for part-time students. This is a part of their legacy.
Wow.
Pouring into you.
Salute.
And I should not have to ask anyone to find a reason not to apply. Do not let anyone else tell you no. Don't tell yourself no. Let someone else do so, right? But this is part of their legacy. And that's what they're pouring into you, not only financially, but also spiritually and emotionally. And of course their presence, because they're here every day and support you. So I just appreciate every one of you. I love you all. And I say that without embarrassment because that's who I am. And that's what we're about. So as we conclude today, just make sure you're a better person today than you were yesterday. And make sure that you are part of this reclamation process. That's a process that you can choose to do. And doing nothing is a choice. So choose wisely. And on that, I wish everyone well. Please be safe. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Indeed.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Hey, D,
Yes,
Derek,
sir.
can you stay on for a sec?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
Corey, real quick.
Yeah.
Whoever else is in CME, like the mentor, whoever
Yeah, Alan
direct.
Patter here.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay.
All right, y'all. Peace.
See you
Sure.
later.
Leroy, I'm gonna contact you about something.
Okay.
I'll call you back later.
All right, cool.
All right.